So all of you be forewarned, I think we are streaming. So even though we have only 2 board members at the moment, but I know we'll have Alicia because she called the meeting. So I think we're streaming. And if we're not, then we'll take the recording tomorrow and put it on YouTube. So excuse me just a sec. Hey there, Elish. I was just telling everyone that, first of all, you have a quorum, and I think all of the board members you wanted to have. Secondly, or expected to have, I should say. And then secondly, we're recording, and I believe we're also streaming. So not positive on the streaming, but if we are not streaming, then we'll put it on YouTube as a recording tomorrow. So just letting everybody know. Your 15 minutes of fame are about to start.
All right. Just making sure everyone, Kathy just joined. Hey, Kathy.
Oh, Kathy's here. Cool.
Hello.
Hey, Kathy. So I keep saying this every time somebody jumps on, but we are recording to place this on the YouTube channel. And I believe I successfully started us streaming as well. I'm not positive, but at any rate, it's a public meeting. So I just wanted to let everybody know. So
awesome. Thank you. I think we could probably get started. It's 6:32. I guess the easiest, like low hanging fruit might be, we know this has come up multiple times, but the closing the library an hour early at 8 p.m., which would give some more flexibility in front loading other shifts with that staff, so that for the busier times there are more staff there present. I did forward to the committee distro the stats that were collected the most recently, and those were based off of not necessarily traffic, but on checkouts. And just as like a personal experience, I did go twice to the library between the hours of 7 and 9 on 2 different days, just to see for myself personally what the traffic looked like. And I kind of came to the conclusion that it did sound like it made sense to shift the hours. But obviously we can discuss. It looked those 2 days that there was basically like 1 staff member per guest in the library. So it seems like if there are times where people are not getting their services met, that that time would be better served. Like it's either at the beginning of the shift so that there's more crossover, or in the mornings is what it sounds like. So did we have any other input? I guess like Tim, Luann, Natalie, is there anything I missed like consideration wise before we discuss?
well, I don't know if people have their most recent board packets handy, but for at least the last 2 board meetings, Sean, the head of the IT department, has included a graphic that includes the foot traffic, and it's color coded. So the coolest times show up as the darkest blue. And board members may recall that I have pushed for a 7 o'clock closure, which to me doubles the advantage. But to me personally, I would say that an 8 o'clock closure from an operational standpoint is almost a no-brainer. My understanding of the process is, and it's new, I believe, for the Buildings and Grounds Committee to discuss that. It's always been something we discuss in July at the annual board meeting. And I applaud the idea to start it in a committee. It means that we can have shorter board meetings because we have enough board members here to discuss it and perhaps make a recommendation to the board for a board meeting. I think typically you would only change that, and maybe I'm just stuck in old ways of thinking, but you would only change that as of July 1st in any given year. I don't exactly know why. It just seems kind of weird to change it in midstream if the board decides to change it. and my understanding is that, the committee could recommend it, but of course the full board would need to vote on it. There are minimum standards for open hours for public libraries of our size in New York State. And we currently exceed them by about, I believe 14 hours a week, but somewhere right around there. Vanessa, welcome. I just want to say we're streaming, and just a reminder, since we haven't done this in a while, that it's a public meeting. So anyway,
Tim,
but that's my take.
I'm not actually on the committee, but I have a question. I know sometimes there were evening programs, and sometimes they started at 7. Is that still the case?
It is.
Would that
And
affect the ability of people to have a program that was more than an hour?
yeah, thank you, Kathy. I hadn't quite thought of that in the heat of this particular moment, but we do a lot of evening programs starting at 7. And our intention is to return fully to a post-COVID environment that's the same as the pre-COVID environment. It seems to me like those programs are always adult programs, so they'd be over in the Westbrook or Helderberg room, but we'd have to make some sort of arrangement for who has to stay and who gets to go home. Simple enough to, if you're involved with a program, give you a separate schedule for that day. Natalie just added something in the chat, which disappeared before I could read it, but I'll go look for it. But yeah, you'd have to accommodate programming in some way. And Alicia, I'm not sure if on your listening tours you talked about that at all, or if Natalie has talked about that with anybody, or Luann.
The programming or the hours?
The programming that typically would take place, between 7 and 8:30 or 7 and 9, so.
No, I didn't specifically ask just to answer that. But I would assume like for those days when that happens, like the staffing would be adjusted, but doesn't have to be the set schedule. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
they can just shift the schedule when needed, but if it's not the norm, like every night doesn't have to be a late night if there's only like a couple days of that programming. But Barbara, what was your question?
Oh, yes, I'm unmuted. The reason we had the later hours, and maybe study habits have changed, but during the school period, kids would be there until 9 o'clock. Now, I don't know, as I said, if study habits have changed or whatever over time, but that plus the programming was, one of the reasons why that 9 o'clock end time was there, because kids really were there using the library, tutors, all kinds of things were going on between 7 and 9. So I would really be concerned that we're sort of shutting the public out if we go with Tim's suggestion of closing at 7. That just seems extraordinary.
Fair enough. I just want to let everyone know that the chat is pretty active, so you might want to pull it up on the right side of your screen. A lot of people saying things that possibly should be taken into account. So.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because like I know I'm doing the boating course next week, and that's till 9:30, and the library closed at 9, so they already have to figure out there's got to be staff that are going to stay after. So I would, then on Fridays, I would think that's already something they've considered, even if they have to close early and programs go later.
Mm-hmm. Natalie says the same thing in the chat, which I believe somebody said a minute ago, that if there's a program, you just keep the people that you need to run the program.
Well, in terms of studying, is there any way to like close certain rooms and just minimize the staff if we want to keep it open late? I know we did do a Wi-Fi boost, so there is Wi-Fi available throughout the whole parking lot. Or I don't know. I've had I can't remember who gave me the idea, but they said, well, we can close like the children's area and like just keep one area open for studying And that would remove 2 staff from needing to be there because there's 2 staff per room for like safety concerns. Now,
At the very least, I think, and the following is an operational matter, but at the very least, I think for the adult and children's reference desk, we should have some of them go home, and just keep one person from 8 to 9 because, typically it's 1 or 2 questions for the entire hour. And also just for reference on the board packet, I talked to Sean after the last board meeting and I said, your charts that you're including are great, but I'd like you to change the graphics, make the numbers larger, put the numbers that he's got over on the side into the actual boxes of the clock structure. So when you next get a board packet, that will be a little bit more. Sean's great, but I personally just found the display to be a little bit difficult to read. Joanne, it looked like you were gonna say something.
Yeah, just from personal experience working at the Altamont Library, when before COVID we were open 5 to 8, or we were open till 8, and my shift was 5 to 8. From 7 to 8, we might have one person come in, and to me, if that wasn't always worth staying open, if you can have staff who are looking to get different times to be better staffed as opposed to staying open late, I would think that would make more sense. I know just from a personal, as a staff standpoint, if you do get students using it, but if you can better place your staff, I think that makes more sense. Just from my expertise.
Barbara, related to your point, the foot traffic statistics show everyone coming in and going out, whether they're getting tutored or studying or just coming in to pick something up. Obviously, they don't scan you and know that you're a student or a tutor, but the numbers of people entering and exiting are so low that it's clear that the community in general isn't using those spaces for studying or tutoring, but it's certainly at those hours. But it's certainly true that if you cut the open hours, they'd obviously be not even more likely not to use it, but they couldn't use it if you closed at 8. But I think you're talking about like 2 or 3 people a night at best. But we do collect 3 kinds of statistics. So 4. We collect the walk-in traffic. We collect and we actually collect a bunch, but we collect the number of reference questions asked in person, by the phone, by the web. And we collect, obviously the number of things that are checked out hour by hour. And then we collect study room usage. And so one way of moving forward, or at least discussing this, would be, for Natalie and I to pull together all those stats into the next board packet report. And I think it probably would be a good idea to take a healthy year pre-COVID and compare it to, for example, the last 12 months. I think personally, people are raising good questions here, but I think it's fair to say that even though most large libraries have completely resumed their pre-COVID levels of things, not any of them that I'm aware of have not had 100% of the traffic come back in. And part of that might be, and I'm thinking here not of students, but of adults who read, half of what's read through our collection is now read online. So you don't need to be here at any point in order to do that, so that might be one reason that foot traffic is not. I would estimate, but we could get you the numbers, that our foot traffic is about somewhere between 80 to 90% of the pre-COVID level. Bethlehem, they believe theirs is 95% of the pre-COVID level. And those are the only, that just came up in a conversation with their director. But part of it could be that so many services have gone electronic, and Barbara, to your direct point, even tutoring can be done through a Zoom link, and maybe that's how it's happening, we could chat with some tutors informally and find out if that has happened, or do a social media post, as And I could even, of course, ask Marie if any of her staff know anything about that, but
And what are Bethlehem's hours? I feel like someone told me they close at 8 as well.
I don't know, but I can certainly try looking them up, or Natalie, if you're well fixed to do that. I have to minimize this screen to do that. Okay, it sounds like Natalie's going to look at it.
Tim, I just have, I guess, a follow-up question. How much have we advertised that our study rooms are open now and that they're available for tutors and, you know, for a small group of people that want to get together, not necessarily for a school project, but, you know, a community thing that they're working on or whatever. I'm just, I guess, fearful of saying that we're going to close the library at 7 or 8 o'clock after we've just opened this beautiful, huge building. And within our own ability is to move some staff ourselves without closing the thing by cutting staff from particular times and adding them on to other times, rather than, you know, 1 year, we're not even 1 year post-COVID yet. So we really don't know if people in the community are getting used to using the library again, and, you know, just see what happens over the course of the next year or what fiscal year or whatever. But to say that this huge, beautiful resource is going to, you know, shut its doors, and maybe allow for programming, but if we're seeing that there are a lack of need at a particular time period, then cut the staffing there and move them, you know, to a busier time versus just closing the library. I mean, that's just a thought. Joanne,
Oh, you want to go to Joanne? I would rather answer your question first, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay. So the thing I would say is these same low levels of usage existed in our building in those hours pre-COVID. That's my recollection, but we'll rearrange. We'll present those statistics in the next board packet. And obviously, I see your point about, you know, restricting services during after a major renovation. That's a valid point. The study room utilization rate, I haven't exactly, you know, studied, but we have the records, and it is 100% with people being turned away for most hours of the day. But after 7, I'm going to guess it's 20%, but we'll work on getting those statistics for you. So I'm not running the meeting, but it looked like Joanne and then followed by Vanessa had comments and questions.
I just had a comment. I know, again, Altamont changed their hours of COVID, and Voorheesville is open now till 8 instead of 9. I don't think there's been a big community pushback. So I don't think us closing an hour early is really going to become a big thing. I mean, I'm sure you'll get people who are upset, but I don't think it's going to be a big pushback if we just close an hour early. Because I know Voorheesville used to be open till 9, and they're open till 8 now on the weekdays.
And I would just in general say that while I've been saying 7 o'clock for many years pre-COVID, it seems to me that if we did anything, 8 o'clock would be a good compromise rather than chopping off 2 hours from the end of the day. And Vanessa, you are patiently waiting.
Yeah, no problem. A quick question. With the Bethlehem library hours, do we have any insight, or Tim, would it be possible to reach out to see if they experience the same drop off in usage? I'm just curious. Obviously, they have 9 to 9, but I'm wondering, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's robust usage. You know, they might be experiencing something similar. So I was just curious.
We can certainly ask, and we can ask both for their general impressions and for data. I think that's a great question because if they're experiencing the same thing, it does sort of support what we're wanting to do. And then one observation I would make is that as Vanessa just quoted and Natalie put in the chat, their hours are 9 to 9, not 9:30 to 9. So Barbara, for example, will remember that we used to open at 10 o'clock and we made it 9:30 somewhat recently, maybe 3-4 years ago. And then we would I think we have discussed on the staff opening at 9 instead of 9:30, especially with a cafe coming in. It seems to make sense to be providing those library services at the same time that people are having their bagel or whatever they're going to serve over there, you know. So it wouldn't be it would be an overall cut. Like if you cut 1 hour 5 nights a week, you're obviously cutting 5 hours. But if you added a half an hour, either 5 or 6 days a week, Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, let's say you did it 6 days, your total cut for the week would be 2 hours, which is a little bit better than a total cut of 5 hours. You know, it's smaller impact. And you'd then be open at 9 to 9:30, where right now, as we open at 9:30, some days we have 5 or 6 people waiting, other days only 2 or 3 to get in. But once we're open, they do stream in fairly steadily, you know. I haven't looked at the numbers, but as I'm kind of walking around the library and talking to people that are working, I'm seeing the people come in. And if they were coming in at the rate at 8 o'clock at night that they're coming in at 9:30 in the morning, I'd want to be open at 8 at night.
So who's going to own the reaching out to Bethlehem on that, just so I can follow up?
Natalie, is that you or me or both of us? Natalie can do it. That's kind of your motto. Barbara, what's the next comment there?
I guess my next question was, if we're going to reduce the hours, is there some way that we can make it known that the community can use the rooms that are available to them, you know, until 9:30 or whatever? Because again, those are such a valuable resource that, you know, if you can guarantee that and then check with the tutors and see why those study rooms aren't being used, you know, I think it'd be a lot more palatable than just saying, you know, we're closing the library early.
Luann, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but could you see using your weekly press release or your occasional email blast or some other of the many avenues of publicity you have to conduct a poll about the use of the library? I'd say between 8 and 9 p.m. My read of the room here, and I presume I'm right, but I may not be, is that 7 would be extreme, you know. So off the top of your head, is there a way we can do an interactive poll or seek comments from the public on that? I like these comments. I can do it, and yes, can do. Well, I think that's a good suggestion, Barbara, but your hand's back up, so.
Oh,
what
no.
else? Okay.
So we have, it looks like we have 3 action items. We have Natalie's going to reach out to Bethlehem. Luann's going to do the poll, and then is someone compiling all of the data together for the next board meeting?
Basically, we'll probably put Sean on that, and you know, it might be something. I mean, it's actually something we should have in every board packet once a month. So once we design it, we'll stick with it.
So that's going to be foot traffic,
circulation data,
circulation data,
study room use, meeting room use, and in-person questions that are being asked at adult or youth desks. And if there's anything, foot traffic, you said, if there's anything else that occurs to anyone, we'll add that in.
I mean, you mentioned the phones, people calling.
Good call. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess at that point, in order for us to make a decision, we'll probably need to take all those things into consideration. So we'll have to table that point for now, and potentially maybe, well, I don't know that we'll be able to make a decision by the next board meeting, but then, you know, if we get all that stuff by the next board meeting, we can plan another one of these, and maybe the one after that be able to make a decision if one needs to be made.
And please note that somewhere up in the chat, our contract with CSEA calls for 45 days notice for that kind of a schedule change. So
Okay. Okay. All right, that's fine. So that one can be tabled. I have a quick update on the cafe. Things are moving along. The one thing that was left was the millwork. And it looked like the contractor that Megan had found ended up needing to go on paternity leave and would not be able to complete the contract until June. So we ended up having to go with an alternative who was able to send Tim over a estimate today, correct?
yes.
Was that the final one, or were we waiting on any more?
Well,
updates?
the final estimate, I could go over in detail, but it included $3,700, and the total is $5,650, which would be within the budget the board has already approved. But it included $3,800 for demolishing the existing countertop by the windows and building a new one. And so I just, as soon as I got it, I emailed back and said, well, could we take the old one apart ourselves as a way to, reduce this cost? And they said, sure, but it's only about taking that existing countertop away is only about $100 of the overall estimate. And at that point, I was like, well, I'm all for saving money, but the $100 includes disposal of this countertop, which is something like 15 feet long. So it wouldn't fit in our existing dumpster. So I said, we'll discuss the estimate tonight, and we certainly have a vehicle to save $100, but I was hoping I would be saving like $900 or something a little bit more significant. And that's not the response that I got. So
And I think we're still within budget, right? This does not
yeah,
change anything. I think if anything, it was lower than the original millwork
that is correct. Yeah.
amount. So in a way, we are kind of saving some money. So there really isn't like much, like this isn't anything we need to vote on. So it was more like an FYI that we were able to problem solve that and pivot that road bump so that we're not delaying the cafe opening anymore.
My personal thoughts on it, like, I don't want to wait another 2 months because I think it's wonderful. We live in a world where gentlemen can go on paternity leave now. I did it myself when our son was born, but we've been promising this cafe for almost 10 years, so 2 more months, and this paternity was announced after we had made the social media announcement that we're opening this spring. So I don't want to wait myself, but I don't have a vote.
Vanessa, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just curious with the new quote and contractor, what their timeline was for completing the mill work.
They didn't give us a completion. They're ready to start at any moment. So
My understanding is that it would be done by the end of the month. Like we'd be opening still in spring, so it doesn't really change the timeline. Our original open date was March 17th, so we were way past that based with the original contractors. So my understanding is that they would be able to complete the work, and then Melanie and crew would be able to come in and decorate or whatever they need to do an opening by beginning of next month.
Okay, thank you.
And the quote they provided was like 5,000 something, which was less than, I think it was around 10,000 from the original millwork contractor.
Yeah, I have
$1,000.
no objection. I was just curious if the impact on the timeline. So that's great.
It's just minimal because we were kind of given a vague end date anyway of the end of this month by Megan originally. It was actually supposed to be March 17th. So, I mean, we're past their original date. So, yeah, the only thing we broadcast was just that it would be open in spring. So we're still delivering on that, luckily, which is nice. Barbara, what did you have?
Could you just go over when you say the millwork, are these cabinets that they're installing? What do they
Cabinets.
mean by millwork?
Cabinets, counter. There's going to be a custom counter that is where people can sit at like a high, are they called high top chairs? I don't know.
Right.
Like bar height chairs in the window. And this added additional seating because there was limited seat, like table seating. So this would be like a place that would be good for like single like students or a single person to sit like up at like this bar height kind of a not shelf, table. And then putting in the shelving and the cabinets over the sink because the original person installed the cabinets incorrectly. So a cabinet needs to be removed from the middle, moved over, and shelving put in between. And then, was there any other millwork? Oh, you're muted, Tim.
So have we already paid for millwork and now it's just being reshuffled? Or are they ripping out the stuff and disposing? You say we're disposing of a 15-foot counter already.
We already approved this additional millwork. This is just a vendor contractor change because
Yep.
the previous contractor is unavailable.
And then they're changing the height of the counter that you reference, Barbara. They're also installing not just the shelving that Elish mentioned behind the counter, but also shelving in a former closet that's going to be the book sales area. And then for the big service counter, the main focus of activity for customers, and then behind the counter for workers, they're just putting some extra bracing brackets underneath it, which the first contractor was going to do, but ended up just like this gentleman knew that his family, his spouse was pregnant, but and had made a lot of commitments, and then couldn't keep them all before the paternity arrived. The baby's already been born. So they're also installing things like splash guards over the sink, a paper towel and soap dispenser for the hand washing sink for the cafe staff, and moving the cabinets that we talked about, which were installed not necessarily incorrectly, but in the wrong place. And then shelving both for books and for kitchen stuff in the, well, kitchen is not the right word, but salt, pepper, condiments, all the stuff that you have in a little cafe. And raising the height of that counter along the front windows, which it was installed at the wrong height. So they're basically just raising it up. There was, in general, a lack of frequent communication between all parties involved. And that, I think the library did their part, but not everybody was jumping on it. And I think part of that is because the project was winding down. So the vast majority of the stuff was already done. And I don't want to name any names, but various contractors and so forth were working on other jobs, and so we would send emails and it was hard to get answers. And that's the reason why the cabinets were installed in the wrong place and the counter at the wrong height. So
yeah, so if we had stayed with the original millwork vendor, we would have incurred additional costs to fix things to make it right. And this new one is coming in, and because they're doing it for less money, we are still staying under even the original approved budget, which is, good all the way around. What's up?
I think that's because the vast majority of it was done already and done correctly, but fixing a couple issues.
Barbara, do you have
Just a quickie, and it may be even too late to ask this question, but when you go to airports and they have the high top tables around the seating area, they now have charging cords, power stations. And I know in many of the cafes now that are being built, what'd you say, commercially, they have charging stations available. Are those going to be along that long counter for us as well, or did we not even
was
The
think?
last,
It was originally
What?
asked for, but did Megan give us a reason why she couldn't? I thought there was a reason she was saying that we could not do that, but it was what we had originally asked for and wanted.
yeah, so we asked for it. I can't remember the reason she told us no, but then I said, well, I want to do it anyway. I think what she was saying is that the electric in that front wall of the building is inside the wall rather than, there's not like a lot of existing outlets. So it involves cutting into drywall. Excuse me, I have to let the dog out. It involves cutting into drywall, but I said, well, let's do it anyway. And the last I knew, when we were working with Josh up to a couple of weeks ago with Megan, the plan was to have it on that front counter. And we can certainly double check tomorrow with the new contractor and make sure that they can do that. I think it might require bringing Flex Electric back in, which is probably one day's work. And I could get a quick quote for that. So I'm taking down that note. I agree with you, Barbara, like, that's almost an expectation now, of new
Yeah.
construction. So, I'll check.
You can also ask the new contractor, Tim.
Yeah. Mhm.
So any other questions on that part before we go to the next item? Okay. Let's see. So I have an update on the farmers market. So there is an ask from Scott if we would consider. So what we ended up doing last year is we extended it in October. So we went July to October essentially. Despite there was like one funny weekend where like the library was hosting their own vendor event. So he was thinking it would be a good idea to open in June. Now there is a little bit of an overlap where the library is open for an hour over the time frame that the farmers market would be open, and there was some staff concern about that overlap driving maybe too much traffic, and I, that came up during my listening tour. And just after consideration, talking with Tim, it seemed like it might be manageable, or it could be a learning experience. I don't know, to see if that would be, something that we could manage or not. The main issue seemed to also be parking. And Tim, I don't know if you were able to reach out to our neighbor to see if they would, have any issues with us using their lot for overflow. Did you get a chance to reach out to them?
I actually have not, but we've done that on a short-term basis before. So we have a maximum of 10 staff in on a weekend, and I just don't anticipate. I basically think that the sky is not falling in terms of parking. The staff reports, I believe, at 12:30 on a Sunday when we open at 1, and the farmers market closes at 2. I will reach out, see if we can, guarantee that the staff could park over there if our 3 lots are, well, 2 lots, since 1 is being used for the farmers market, are both full. But last year during the market, in all the different months, I probably went to the market probably 10 times and never observed a situation where there weren't 4 or 5 or more parking spots available. So I think it's just a little bit of a concern that's not, insurmountable. So that's where I'm at on that. So.
I just wanted to comment quickly that, golly, if we could get more traffic and more interest in the library, to me, that's a win-win situation. Probably people that have gone to the farmers market, some of them may never have even thought of going into the library, and I think that would be fantastic.
Well, and I think he did. There was an issue where he jumped the gun and he posted on his social media about opening in June. And what did he say? There was like 600 likes. So it seemed like it was a pretty well-received and positive announcement. So it does look like the community would want that. And on a side note, he is this year having 6 interns from a local college too. So in terms of their timing as well, he was saying that, you know, they'd be available in June, but they wouldn't be in like October, you know, because they would have already gone back to school. So they would also kind of fit that small community need, right, of those 6 interns to have more of time and exposure with the farmers market. So so we had a meeting, Tim and Scott and I, last week to sort of review where we were at and you know, see kind of what made sense. We did talk through this early opening. There was like a little bit of a contentious email thread with a staff member that had to be addressed as well. And hopefully we got to an amicable point with that, where I had made a recommendation that if there was any miscommunication via email or you know, misconstrued messaging, to please like escalate to Tim or myself as the building and grounds chair, and Tim is the director, depending on, you know, what side it was coming from, staff or vendor side. So we can hopefully resolve issues through those channels. So I think that ended up in a good place. And right, and then we also discussed the contract, saying that everything seemed to go well enough last year that there didn't seem to be a need to change the contract much, other than maybe the date. And there was like a typo, Tim, right? And then I just wanted to make sure that there was a clause in defense of our staff that if, for example, if more unprofessional incidents occurred, that would give us an out of the contract. And Kathy, I don't know. I know you looked it over and you provided some feedback, but I didn't see feedback on that. So I don't know. Did you find language that would cover us in that case?
I don't know. I just noticed that you didn't put the hours in the contract. Like it said that it was open on Sundays, but it didn't say what time. That should probably be in the contract, wouldn't you
I
think?
agree with that. And then Kathy, I want to address a concern of Kathy's via email and the question Elise just asked. So Kathy pointed out that the first part of the contract identifies the library as the owner of the grounds. And I believe that may be incorrect. I think the school district is the owner of the grounds. So the first thing I did in investigating that is also look at the cafe contract, and it also identifies the library as the owner. But I believe the building and the grounds are both owned by the district, and the building's contents are owned by the library. So I sent an email to Chrisley and Chanton quoting both of those documents and addressing the concern that, you know, maybe they need a couple sentences rewritten in order to make it clear that we are not the owner. We're really kind of the operator of the library, is my thought. So I asked her to verify ownership and also find out or advise as to whether the language should be changed. And then Elise, I'm sorry, could you restate your question? I have an answer for it, but, oh, yeah. The out clause, basically, like, can the library get out of this if there's any unprofessional behavior or harmful to the library behavior? And there is a clause in the farmer's market contract that says any failure to abide by or default in any of the terms of this agreement shall be grounds for immediate termination of the agreement and all farmers market LLC's rights hereunder. In addition, the library may terminate this agreement at any time on 5 days written notice to Farmers Market LLC. I am not a lawyer, but it sounds to me like all we need to do is give 5 days notice if there's some egregious behavior that is bad for our image, or you know, anything that he does that we don't think we would want our tenant doing. So I think we're covered on that issue myself.
Okay,
I know we
Vanessa,
have-
did you have something? Sorry,
Yeah.
really, before we get too much farther out. Yeah, your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, in your discussions, I know it had previously come up about frankly, lack of produce at the farmer's market. Did you guys address, have you had any discussions of the type of vendors for the new season, if it's possible to have actually more produce?
We have had some discussions, but not recently, unless Elise, you've had some that I'm not aware of.
No,
But
I had not heard that issue before.
I've shared my opinion that there ought to be more than two people selling fresh produce, and I can share it again. And also, I think Kathy pointed out there's a blank spot in the contract in terms of maximum number of vendors any given week.
Yeah,
And I think we should set that number. I thought I saw elsewhere in the contract 30, but I know that there were some weeks last year where he had up to 42. So that in effect, if we limited it to, let's say 36, right there, we'd probably get back the parking spaces that the staff is concerned about missing. You know, it's a little bit delicate since this is a business and this is how he makes his living, but maybe we can get some language in the contract that says the library reserves the right to reduce the possible number of vendors if any traffic congestion, parking problems occur, you know, something like that. I don't know if, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that we should have some control so he doesn't bring in 1,000 vendors, you know.
Sure, and I thought that the vending area was kind of geographically limited, the top.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
Not,
it
so
is.
you said some weeks when there were more, were they down below?
He just reduced the size for each vendor and packed them in a little tighter, you know. But it is understood, and I'll double check to make sure it's actually written in the contract that it's only in that new high level parking lot. So.
Okay.
I'm going to say this, even though it's a public meeting. When I talk to him next, I'm going to say it would be good if there could be more produce vendors than liquor vendors, you know, because I believe there were 4 liquor vendors every month, and they're all local, craft, distilled, you know, local businesses, either from Guilderland or, you know, Voorheesville, New Scotland, et cetera, like very close. But, you know, is it a farmer's market or is it a other kinds of products market, you know? So I'll talk to Scott about that and say, you know, the answer we got, I forget who brought that up, it might have been Vanessa, but the answer we got a couple times we raised it last year is that those produce vendors, A, are hard to find, and B, they get upset when, you know, there's a lot of competition at the market. And I'm not saying I know more about running farmers markets than Scott, but if that's true, then wouldn't it be true about all the kinds of vendors, alcohol vendors, you know, craft vendors, bread makers, you know, et cetera. So we'll continue that discussion
So
and try to get.
are you going to be running this by Chris? Because
Yeah.
you know, the school district you know aspect of it might affect other parts of the contract as well.
Right. Yep. So I sent her that email at probably 4:30 today.
Oh,
And I
okay.
apologize, Kathy, you raised the question, but for some reason, you know, I just wasn't thinking through. So I sent it to Chris Lane Chanton and also to Elise, but I actually can forward it to the committee right now while we're talking, that I sent to Chris and Elise. And what I'm saying is I should have sent it to you since you are the one who raised, first of all, you're the board president, and secondly, you're the one who raised the question. So, so I'll find it here and forward it along. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I think all of these things that we're talking about, you know, last year was a first stab at a contract, and I want to say that, when we met with Scott, Elisha and I, Scott had originally last year asked for a 5-year contract, and we all felt, it was a while back, but my recollection is we all felt, well, let's test the waters and see how this goes. And then the community feedback was very, very positive. But given some of the issues that Elisha brought up, such as announcing that he was doing business with us again this year before we had a contract, I think no longer than 1 year again, until we can iron out, get better communication going, and I think it's tremendously positive. But let's both sides act with professionalism, and so that's what we were kind of working on there. So anyway, so I advise no longer than 1 year.
Do you have another question, Barbara?
It's more of a comment. Putting in language into the contract about unprofessional conduct, to me, is very ephemeral. What Tim read that we already have in the contract, I think covers any, terrible incident or whatever that is happening, at the farmer's market. But to use sort of a blank phrase would bother me. And I'm not a lawyer, but even as a non-lawyer, it's not very specific. So I like the language that we have right now.
Yeah, I don't think we weren't proposing exchange. I just wanted to ensure that that covered us, like completely. So I'm not a lawyer, so I was hoping, an actual lawyer would know better than me. So it sounds like if it's okay, then my recommendation, or what I'd like to vote on, is if we have a consensus that we would recommend renewing the same contract. If we want to recommend an opening in June, and having it span from June until the end of September. And obviously, I think this would also, the other argument for the 1-year contract is to see how this year works with those new dates, to be able to roll into a longer contract the next time around. Because if we've kind of ironed out the kinks there, then, it makes sense to do a longer contract after that. And it looks like we're covered all the way around. Does anybody have any issues making that recommendation, or do we want to go to a vote?
I'm comfortable with it.
Anyone else have anything to discuss? Okay, so I will go down the line. Joanne?
Yes.
Okay. Vanessa?
Yep.
Okay. And then me, yes. Okay. And that recommendation, the wording I'm going to say is, what was the typo, Tim? Just so I know. You mentioned there was a typo, but I'm not sure what it is. And so we know to look for it.
Yeah, that's good. It's a full disclosure kind of thing. So last year, when I was initially negotiating with Scott before Chris drew up a contract, my initial starting point was $200 a week to charge him. And he came back and he said that he'd never paid that much anywhere. And according to him, it's a low margin business. There's a lot of costs we don't know about for insurance and things like that. And so we discussed at the board meeting, I believe, $200 a month, or for those months with 5 Sundays, which there's one this summer, I think it's July, if I remember right, making it $50 a week as opposed to $200 a week, which had been my starting point. But the way the contract was written, and nobody noticed it at the time, actually it was noticed at the time, it says, I'm looking for the payment clause here. It says, sorry to not know the contract top to bottom without looking at it, but it says, the basic concept, I'm having trouble finding it right now, is that Scott and I agreed, and I reported to the board when we were entering into this contract that we were going to go with $50 a week. But the initial draft of the contract, that wasn't fixed. And it says $200 a week when I in fact had asked Chris to change it to $200 a month. And so he ended up signing a contract that said for $200 a week, but you may not remember this, but my recollection and Scott's recollection is that everybody understood we were actually talking about $50 a week. When we met,
Just going to change the language to $50 a week, and
yeah,
it sounds like that's okay. Is that okay with everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
paragraph
that's going to be my recommendation. Fix the typo to $50 a week. Add in the hours per Kathy's request, and have the date starting in June. And I think that kind of covers our bases on that.
Except for that we still have to figure out the language around the library or the school district. And
right, yeah.
And I think
yeah.
that, you know, Kathy brought up a really good point. There might be some additional changes that are, or limitations to an agreement with property owned by a school district.
Mhm. Yeah, it could become a big issue. And so like when we met with, and I have to say, you know, Kathy did bring up a great point, which nobody else that I'm aware of was thinking about when we met with Scott last Thursday. So the answer we get from Natalie, or excuse me, from Chris Lanchapman will be really key there. Like when we talked with Chris last year about both the cafe and the farmer's market, we were kind of focusing on the concept of, can a publicly owned property charge rent? And we, you know, discussed that among other things about like a cafe that's at the town golf course, and a lot of, you know, if you go to the legislative complex downtown, you see Starbucks in there and so forth. So it can be done, but I think we kind of glided over that we're not, as far as I know, we're not actually the owner of this property. And so, you know, if Scott is listening, we'll attempt to get an answer to that as quickly as possible. You know, off the top of my head, I'm not aware of any school districts who rent their property out for farmers markets, but there may well be some, you know.
There's an elementary school in Bethlehem that has a farmer's
Okay.
market.
Okay. Public school.
Yep.
Okay. And, you know, that, I'm sorry, at least we don't just stop there. We get the lawyer's opinion and, you know, make sure that it's okay. That elementary school, I think it's fairly obvious, is owned by that school district. So that it may be there may be a parallel in that if an elementary school that's owned by a district can do it, then a public library that's owned by a district can do it. But I think it's a due diligence thing. That's what I actually called the email, is due diligence question, you know.
To
So,
clarify, I actually also additionally meant I would question if the liquor vendors could be on school property.
yes. Good question. Now, last year I asked that question of Chris Lanchanton, and she said, you know, I could find the old emails, but she basically said, whatever you and your board are comfortable with. But the difference here, Vanessa, that Kathy originally pointed out is that, you know, this is, as far as we know, school district property, and that might be
Which
different.
would make
Yeah.
it
So,
a free zone.
yeah.
But
Yep.
also that has implications for other events at the library as well, if that is the case. So,
Well, it does, although we've gotten over those, like we get a 1-day liquor license when we're doing a gala
Sure.
or that kind of thing.
but that isn't at play here. We're not doing that for the farmers.
Yeah, and you know, to go a little further, the next time we get a 1-day liquor license for a foundation event or something, we may have to clarify that we don't own the building, you know. You know, or the ground that it's on.
Do we not own the building or we don't own the property?
My understanding is that the building and the land are owned by the district, and the, you know, shelving, books, computers, et cetera, are owned by the library. So,
The operational control though is ours.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we insure, like, does the school district insure our building, or do we insure our building? Like, we insure our contents, but
Yeah, I would have to review that, but I believe last year we, at the advice of our broker, fully transferred to the school district, insuring the building and the property, and the library insuring only what was within it. And I can double check that if you'd like, but it was kind of a big thing. If you recall, Marcia has a background in that type of law, insurance law, and she came to a meeting with our broker. And we also, like, it was related to the fact that we were reopening with a lot more value, and the replacement cost value of a square foot of operational space had gone way up since the last time our insurance plan had accounted for that. So can't remember those numbers over the top of my head, but basically the idea was like, when we last visited your insurance rates, you were paying something like $5.20 per square foot for replacement, and the market now is something like $14 and 30 cents or something. So we did take a big jump in some of our insurance costs, even though we had offloaded the buildings and grounds to the school district. But insuring the interior became more expensive, in part because we had a lot more interior, 6,500 more square feet than we had before. I can revisit those emails and dig them up, but we had Chris Lynch and the school district lawyer, forget his name, and Chris Broussard from the insurance broker, and everybody agreed we need to simplify this operation. Actually, I believe it was now that I'm talking and kind of rambling, I believe there was some double coverage before we made this separation and arrangement, that they would be responsible for insuring the building and the grounds, and we would be responsible for the operations inside. But might as well do a search and keep you guys posted on that based on our emails from last year.
okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia, I think you're muted.
Thanks. I was going to say, so the action items are, we're going to clean up the kind of fuzziness in the contract, hopefully by the next board meeting, so that we can be able to, put our proposal up for signing with this vendor again with the proposed changes. So we just need to clarify the property language, whether liquor vendors can be on school property, and that we're going to request more like fresh produce vendors if possible. I did have a thought that maybe Scott does carry some sort of provisional liquor license to be able to have those vendors there. So, or they might have their own individual ones. So that could possibly resolve that issue. But yeah, so I guess, Tim, are you owning that research, those research points with Chris then?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll keep the committee and Kathy and Barbara, if you're interested, apprised. So.
Okay. I think that's the main points. I know, Tim, you were going to, this is not something that will need to be decided today, I don't think, but you were going to give some context for request for like a beautification project kind of a thing, or art, or
Sure.
how you want to.
I'll try to do it real quickly because we're over an hour. I don't have a time limitation, but you guys are all volunteers and we can't resolve it tonight anyway. But a couple of weeks ago, the vast majority of our feedback on the new building is that people love it, but some people do complain about kind of the visual view from the entryway, and it's sort of exceedingly brown and kind of spare. And so I had this idea because I'd been involved with a lot of meetings with George Wilhelm and David Gilliam about closing the construction project. And, you know, I don't want to go in depth, but we're significantly under budget. So I thought to myself, and bear with me here, but I said to George and David in one meeting, could we set aside like $50,000 and use it to purchase local art and to frame that same art if it's not already framed, so that we could, you know, make the library a little more colorful. You know, I had been to a social event at the Clover Pond Winery on Route 20, and it's got a very similar atrium-like ceiling in their main room that we have in our reading room, and it's got colorful banners hanging and so forth. And so I basically, you know, I was just suggesting the idea, so I just picked 50,000 sort of off the top of my head. Both David and George Wilhelm told me, you can, up until we close this building proposal, which our goal is, or building project, which our goal is to close by the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. He said, you can buy any local art you want right now. You're so far under budget. And you should probably go to the Buildings and Grounds Committee to ask for permission. And I said, but can't I set aside X number of dollars, because there's a lot of blank walls in the library, and you know, you don't want to just rush out and buy, you know, things that are currently available today. You want to, you know, kind of select good stuff, which may not all be right in front of us and on the market right now. And they said, no, you can't, you know, if you earmark money before the closing of the project for specific items, you're in good shape. But you can't just say, hey, we're going to use this 50,000 or 10,000 over the next 5 or 10 years to buy art. I then double checked that with Megan Brennan and Paul Mays at the architectural firm, and they were like, putting art in as part of a project is always good, but it has to be done before the project winds up. So basically where we're at right now is there are 2 or 3 opportunities to do good art that's locally created that we could finish by June 30th. And so I would like to get on that, get it priced, and you know, come back to you guys. And I'm looking at spending more like probably 5,000 tops, because I wish we could set aside a pot of money for that on an ongoing basis, but it's against the rules. So, you know, but to give you an example, we recently had an art exhibit that a young woman, of paintings from a young woman who's about 25, lives in Guilderland, graduated from here. And there's a painting she did of a farmhouse that's on Old State Road, and it was built in 1838. And she's not selling the original painting. She loves it, but she sells prints, and we could get a print and frame it, and then we'd have a nice little piece of Guilderland art. So it's stuff like that that I'd like to pursue, and I don't really need any permission until I have a price list from you guys, or for you guys, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So
And so
that-
that was my recommendation when Tim had mentioned it, was to form a committee at the staff level, right? To have
Yeah.
weigh in for what those might be and what the costs are,
Mhm.
so that we can review. So that's the thought process of what's going to happen next, right? You're
Yeah.
getting
And, you know,
feedback, and then we'll come back to us with what
sure.
is
And
being asked.
frankly, like, I don't want to raise your expectations, because, you know, we're hiring a fiscal officer and we're reorganizing the library, and we have put the committee together, but we might have very limited results between now and June 30th, you know, so, and to preclude an extra committee meeting, if I end up with 2 or 3 things I'd like to buy, maybe I'd just show them at a board meeting when you have to be there anyway, you know. Because last I knew, and Kathy is probably our expert here, but I don't think you can make buildings and grounds expenditures related to the project unless you do it in a meeting. You know, I can't send you an email and say, here's the 3 things I'd like to buy. Is that okay? You know, so always cognizant of your time, and I don't want to like call a meeting to spend $2,000. And yet I don't have the authority to spend it without talking to board members. So I'll report back with whatever we can accomplish within the next, what is it, actually 3 months, April, May, June. So we'll try.
Quick question, Tim, are you looking for just Guilderland artists, or were you more broadly considering like the capital region, like local as in capital region?
It's a good question. So and I don't exactly know the answer, but where the starting point was A, that there's a lot of beige walls that are blank, and B, that when Paul Mays first came as a consultant before the board had decided to pursue a project, and once the board decided to pursue the project, in a lot of public meetings, Paul would say, in the old library, you walk into it and you could be in Rochester or Poughkeepsie or Indianapolis. Like there's really nothing here that tells you you're in Guilderland. So part of the objective is to feature art with subjects that are in Guilderland, and or with painters or sculptors or whatever who are from Guilderland. But that's not to say that if some Albany-based artist, ended up painting a mural for us, there's no reason that artist couldn't paint a mural that either was about books and libraries and so forth, or was somehow based in Guilderland history. So I don't think the idea is only Guilderland in terms of both the artist and the subject, but I think we'd want to kind of evoke our local area rather than getting a painting of the Eiffel Tower, or something like that. So
Fair.
that's the best answer I can give you at the moment.
I might have some local content
Yeah.
to share with helpful sort of.
You can either call me
Okay,
or
there's-
email me, and we'll move as fast as we can. So.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yep. Also, we are, on a related note, interfacing with the school district to try to get some things created by high school artists, and possibly even middle school. Anyway, so that was just a quick update kind of thing, and we'll see what we can get done and be back in touch.
Okay, and so I think that's pretty much all we have. Does anybody have anything else that we need to review, or any questions on anything that we've discussed already?
I guess just one quick update is that, and Megan is well aware of this, we are still owed a fair amount of landscaping by, I think, I can't remember the exact name, so I'm not going to butcher it, but they were saying last fall that they were having trouble hiring workers, and that's why they couldn't do it. So for example, we have a big round planter in front of the Tawa Center room that's empty, but it's that time of year, and we will push them again to either finish the job or refund some of the money, and more accurately, I believe we haven't paid for it yet. So we would just say, well, we're canceling the order because you can't get a tree over here and get it planted, so, but for buildings and grounds, you should be aware that there's some pending landscaping, so.
And along those lines, Tim, the outdoor furniture, is
Mhm.
that all resolved and ready to be placed out?
We're working on that this week. So there's 2 picnic tables that go under that awning at the front of the.
Which looks really cool, by the way. That was really cool to see that.
Thank you. I was pleased too. I was also surprised it held up so well in those heavy wet snowfalls, but it's porous. So as soon as there's sunshine, it begins to drip
Yeah.
off, So I instructed our maintenance department yesterday, I believe, to get those heavy metal picnic tables installed in the front, and also we have a bunch of old wooden benches that we've been using up in the farmers market area during the farmers market, and I'd like them power washed and either stained or painted, and they need a few minor repairs. But the back the back literary garden area, we got all the furniture that we ordered, and we're fine there. And it's all made out of that recycled plastic stuff, so it requires a little cleaning, but not installation. It's movable. But we are starting with that and hoping that the good weather continues and we can get the back open soon. So
Great.
that's that.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming. I hope you have a good night. Thanks for hanging in a little later. I appreciate it.
And my new standard for board members, after 9 years, I realized you're volunteers. So thank you for volunteering your time. So
Yeah, no, thanks for doing
I may not be the
Thanks
smartest
for-
guy in the world, but I figured that one out. So have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Yep. Thanks for
night.
everyone who joined us. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.